By definition, anytime there is a negotiation, there is an item of value that two or more parties want. It takes a mixture of strategy and psychology to exit negotiations a winner, especially when you factor in the emotional friction of a divorce. But what does winning a negotiation really mean in context to a divorce? And how do you unravel in weeks or months what it took years or even decades to knit together? Well, that's exactly what we're going to discuss today, so let's get started. My name is Ryan Burns, and welcome to the Divorce and Real Estate Expert, where we provide guidance on divorce and real estate topics. Today, we're going to discuss strategies you can employ during divorce negotiations in order to minimize time, money, and emotional energy consumed and maximize the outcome. So, let's get right into it. First things first, this has to be an informed negotiation. It has been my experience that in the vast majority of divorces, there is one spouse who tends to manage the finances more than the other. Whether that spouse was more diligent in managing the accounts and bills, whether the other spouse had a full plate, maybe one spouse wanted to control the flow of money and or related information, whatever the reason, it's time for full transparency. The days of siloed information and division of labor are over when it comes to the books. Both parties must have unfettered access to any statements, records, account details, tax filings, everything. Unrestricted access demonstrates trust, puts both spouses on even footing for future discussions, and removes questions about what the other spouse is hiding, mostly. If you cannot work with your spouse to achieve transparency, it is entirely likely that your negotiations will fall apart. If that happens, the attorneys will achieve transparency through what is called discovery. Discovery is a back and forth request for an examination of documents. I have seen this process cost multiple tens of thousands of dollars and take months and months and months, by which time the documents are outdated and require new documents, which require more review. You can see where this goes. Start your negotiations with a win by saving yourself $5,000 to $50,000 or more and share the information you'll end up sharing anyway. The next thing you want to do is to establish exactly what it is that you're negotiating for. That means writing down in as organized a fashion as possible everything that needs to be accounted for in a negotiation and settlement agreement. Every bank and retirement account, every credit card, air miles, mortgage, home equity line of credit or loan, family cell phone plan, family car insurance plan, piece of furniture, recurring bill, everything. Spreadsheets are perfect for capturing and organizing this type of information. Think of this as putting all of those assets, liabilities, and property onto the negotiating table for discussion. Failing to completely identify these negotiable pieces will cost you time, stress, and likely money. Failing to completely account for all of these pieces will cost you the same. Being detailed and granular and capturing information, like on a spreadsheet, will provide clarity through the negotiation process and save you time, money, and headaches. It doesn't have to be perfect to start, or ever. Start by jotting a few details off the top of your head and add to them as you discover relevant details throughout the process. Now that you've organized what specifically you're going to be negotiating for, consider a few different configurations of who gets what. Maybe one configuration has you keeping the house and your spouse keeping the retirement accounts and the air miles. Another configuration might involve selling the house, splitting the retirement accounts, and trading the credit card rewards for the living room furniture you always like better anyway. The goal here is not to figure it all out at once, but to have a respectful dialogue. Simply collaborating on what the negotiating picture looks like in a respectful way is a victory. From there, look for small wins. Maybe you each have mementos from your parents that would logically and obviously go to the original recipient. Allocating those items to the appropriate spouse can be a small victory and put something in each person's side of the ledger. That's a win. Now see what else you can agree on and work your way through a configuration. If something is a huge sticking point, consider putting it aside and work through some other items. Be mindful of each other's limits for one session and try to end on a high note for the next session, which leads us nicely into our next tip. The next tip is to understand that negotiations can fall off the tracks up to 7 times. While it is understandable to worry that talks will fall apart, I'm here to tell you it's pretty damn likely that will happen. I'm also here to tell you that that's okay. Negotiations can be intense when the stakes are purely financial. When you add pent-up emotion into the mix, it's a simple and effective recipe for frustration and anger. Prepare yourself for temporary breakdowns in forward progress. Be ready to take a step back and regroup, but be ready to step back in and make sure the breakdowns are temporary. When you do return to negotiations, try to avoid picking up right where you left off. Revisit items that have already been agreed to. Look for a quick win on a topic that you think is likely to be mutually agreeable. You're untangling a knot, so try to pull at a different thread to jumpstart talks in a way that will drive the process forward. Next, and this is easier said than done, is to compromise. In your time with your spouse, you likely acquired some things you like a lot which your spouse doesn't care for, and vice versa. These items are the ones that are easier to negotiate for, but what about the things you both want badly, especially when there's monetary value involved? Well, now it's time to compromise, which by definition involves mutual concession. Keep this in mind. You're going from one shared household to two separate households, so your bills will likely increase. And you're dividing your property and assets in half-ish. There is going to be pain. That's pretty much unavoidable. There may also be times when you have to dig your heels in so you don't turn into a doormat or get perceived as one. Look at the situation from the other person's point of view if you're able. Try and bundle a few things together and try different configurations. Your spouse wants ABC, then you want XYZ. No good? How about 1, 2, 3? Resolve what you can, and if a tricky item has to be pushed down the list for now, then so be it. Remember, generally speaking, if you and your spouse can't figure it out by yourselves or with a mediator, then you engage attorneys and they will help you. And that ain't cheap. If you and the attorneys can't figure it out, then the judge will let you know what you own, what your spouse owns, and what's being sold, and the proceeds allocated between you at whatever percentage the judge deems fit. Don't let things go that far, because if you don't like the judge's ruling, you can appeal and potentially end up back in front of the same judge explaining why you don't think they got it right the first time. How do you think that's going to go? The last tip is to bring in outside help. Now, hiring someone to facilitate these negotiations costs money. However, I would argue that not hiring someone trained to drive this type of negotiation forward will also cost you money, along with time delays and significant mental friction. Think about this. When you're not sure you've picked out the right outfit for an event, what do? You ask an outsider for advice because you're too close to the decision and you want an unbiased perspective. There are several types of experts you can hire for this type of work, like mediators, collaborative attorneys, and depending on the situation, a financial professional with divorce experience. Look at it this way. If you wanted to build a nice big addition onto your house, you could do the work yourself and save money, but chances are it's going to take way longer, not come out the way you expect, and you're going to have to bring in a builder in the end anyway. The end result is way more work, time, money, and frustration than if you brought in an expert in the first place. Use the right expert at the right point in time in the process and minimize the financial and emotional expenses. Thank you for watching, and if you'd like some insight into common mistakes to avoid when dividing assets during a divorce, then click the first link in the description below. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for more tips on navigating divorce and real estate. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below and we'll be sure to respond. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.